So the word going around online is that one of the producers from Atlus wanted to remake two of the older Persona games that came out back in the 90s. And as many people know, this year marks the 30-year anniversary of Persona 1 Revelations, which came out back in 96. And then you have Persona 2, which came out, I want to say, back in like 1999 or 2000. Um, those games looked significantly different than what we got from Persona 3 up to Persona 5. And more people know about Persona 3 up until Persona 5 because 3 was kind of like the first game that kind of got the series into like the spotlight because it came out during the PS2 era. Um, Persona 1 and Persona 2 was more niche because back in the 90s it wasn't as big. And um and not only that, like I feel like the first two games had um they had issues with like localization. Well, at least the first game had issues with like localization. And the second game was considered to be really controversial to a point where Atlas tried to stay away from it as much as they can. And that's one of the reasons why with like Persona 2, got a we never got like a remake during its 20th anniversary or anything like that because Persona 2, well, like you look at the titles, there's like, two games for Persona 2. One's Innocent Sin, the other one's Eternal Punishment. And just those names alone would draw backlash in this day and age. As a lot of people know, the 90s, the 2000s, um, they were like a completely different era of gaming and just a completely different era in relation to life. And I feel like the plot for Persona 2 was really intriguing, especially for that of Innocent Sin, because like the villain in Persona 2, his name was actually Joker. And but he was different from the Joker of Persona 5, who was like the main protagonist. And Persona 2 was more about childhood sin and like repressed memories and stuff like that. And I feel like the plot for that was really really intriguing. But um but I don't know, like Persona 2 was really controversial, especially like in one of the games. Like the final boss was, it's something that would offend a lot of people nowadays because of all like the Nazi references and stuff like that. And I'm not quite sure if Atlas could pull something like that off like today, or if they would be able to pull something like that off today. And if they tried to remake like Persona 2, um, it'd be like the equivalent of Capcom trying to remake Resident Evil 5. And don't get me wrong, like Resident Evil 5 was a good game, but it was also controversial because a lot of people felt like it had like racial overtones and stuff like that. So I feel like Capcom has done everything in their power to avoid that. And I feel like Atlas has done the same thing to try and avoid remaking Persona 2 for that reason, or even drawing any attention to it. Persona 1 is really not that bad. It was more about like fortune telling and all that other stuff. And I think the biggest issue with Persona 1 was that, like during the localization, the American localization of that game, I think they whitewashed one of the character, and that was something that came under scrutiny when it was released back in the day. But I don't think Persona 1 Revelations is something that would draw a lot of negative attention if Atlas decided to remake that. In fact, this year is actually the 30-year anniversary of Persona 1. And um and since they never really like did anything during its 25th anniversary, and they're not really doing anything right now, it tells me that Atlas is trying to stay as far away from that as they possibly can, and they've been doing that for a reason. And even if they do remake those two games, um, a lot of people probably wouldn't I feel like it only appealed to a niche audience of gamers, maybe like, hardcore Persona fans, but Persona 3 to 5 is what everybody is really familiar with. So I don't know. I just feel like there's really no need to do that at all. But yeah, the Atlus producer said they'd like to, if the time is right, but I don't know. It just seems like there hasn't been any like major like demand for those two remakes at all. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I feel like those games, like they've been ported in the past. I think Persona 1 Revelations um was ported to like PSP back in like '09, 2010, and then Persona 2 Innocent Sin was ported to PSP back in 2011, but obviously they try to avoid, porting that to the PlayStation 3 or the PlayStation 4 or anything like that because of, I guess the fear of the potential backlash and scrutiny that would come with trying to remake, Persona 2 Innocent Sin or Eternal Punishment or what have you. But but yeah, there's definitely money to be made on those two games if Atlas really wants to go about doing that. But right now, that's not what everybody's focusing on. More people are focusing on Persona 6, and I don't think we have an official release date for that game just yet. We haven't seen any gameplay footage for that just yet. All we've seen is like a reveal trailer, and we do know that the theme is going to be green. And a lot of people have to realize that for the most part, Persona has like changed a lot, like the game itself, and I guess what separates the Persona series from other RPGs is something that really stands out in this day and age. And and I don't know. I mean, I haven't really um seen or heard anything about the latest Persona games being like controversial or anything. Like 2 was highly controversial, 1 was controversial to an extent, but I don't think those 2 games um sold nearly as much as 5 or 4 or even 3. So there's really no need to go back and like remake the first 2 Persona games if there's like really no need to, or if there isn't really a high demand for that or anything like that. But at the same time, it would definitely raise a lot of questions in people's eyes as to why Atlas has avoided, remaking those games or, porting those games or talking about those games in general.